Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, podcasting from Ma'aludim in Israel. Nothing much has changed since the last week as far as the virus is concerned, but perhaps it is time that we realize this may be the way things are going to be, at least for an uncertain amount of time. It is difficult to come to grips with such potentially depressing and pessimistic thoughts, but sometimes they're necessary. Nobody really knows the future, but we do know the present, at least to some degree. Acceptance of harsh reality may be tough, but that doesn't make it evil. With that as an opening, let us move on to the Parsha. This week's Parsha is called Va'etchanan, a rather confusing-looking word when spelled in English. It means, "and I pleaded," or something along those lines. It refers to a moment of deep prayer that Moshe underwent upon contemplating that he would not be able to enter Israel to reach the final stage of his mission to lead the Israelites on the exodus to the Promised Land. His prayer was one last attempt at rectifying the divine decree that he could not enter the land. He wanted more than anything to see the mission through, but as fate would have it, his pleas were denied, and he was told that he would see the land but never enter it. This did not end his role in the Bible and in this final book of Deuteronomy. His long speech went on until its destined end, which was his death. The rest of the Parsha contains a good deal of the theological foundations of Judaism, including a retelling of the Ten Commandments and the primary biblical declaration of the oneness of God, known as the Shema, meaning listen. To have two such vital facets of the Bible in one Parsha would be nothing short of power-packed. As it turns out, however, this is only a part of what this Parsha contains. This class is being recorded on Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which we discussed last week. It is the day commemorating the destruction of both the first and second temples in Jerusalem about 2,600 and 1,950 years ago. A handful of other calamitous events in Jewish history are believed to have taken place on this very day. It is somehow written into Jewish fate that this day, of all days, should be the one that represents national disaster for the Jews. Why things had to be this way is anybody's guess. There is no question that it is linked to the catastrophic event of the spies, described earlier in the Torah and discussed in an earlier podcast. This is the way things are in Judaism. It is an odd mixture of fate and human choice, combined in some way to make up a seemingly illogical and outdated notion called destiny. But Judaism, despite its fairly strong allegiance to science and logic and staying up with the times, has to a great extent held on to notions like this to enable its adherents to weather the storms of history. Without it, we wouldn't know where we stood in the great scope of things, and we wouldn't really be Jews. One of the odd Jewish customs of Tisha B'Av is that it is forbidden for Jews to study most sections of Torah, including almost all of the Bible and much of rabbinic law, throughout the entire day. The reason for this strange custom is that the study of Torah is considered to be a source of great joy for the Jews, and such an emotional uplift would not be appropriate on such a day. While this may strike many people as counterintuitive, it remains an established custom and is largely abided by. Because of this, much of this Parsha cannot be read or studied today. It happens, however, that one of the sections of the Torah that can be studied is found in this very Parsha. It is right smack in the middle of the Parsha, and it opens with a prophecy that the Israelites would not obey the laws of God for very long while in the land. This surprising prediction comes almost as a matter of fact, and we read it as naturally as we read the Ten Commandments. But that is not all. The section goes on to describe the consequences of this abandonment of God. Exile from the land, that most biblical of fates, will be visited upon them. In foreign lands, they will worship other gods, a seemingly counterproductive punishment. But in the course of that spiritual downfall, they will somehow seek out God and find God in the depths of their hearts and souls. This will not be an easy process, but it will happen because God will never forget them, no matter how far they stray. In the middle of all this is a dramatic statement to demonstrate the historical basis for this remarkable sequence of events. Here's the quote. When you inquire about earlier days that came before you, from the day that God created man upon the earth, and from the end of the heavens until the end of the heavens, has there ever been such a wondrous thing, or has its like ever been heard? Has a nation ever heard the voice of God speaking from the fire, as you have heard and still lived? Or has God miraculously come to take a nation from the midst of another nation with signs and wonders, war, and a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and awesome sights, as all that Hashem your God did in Egypt before your very eyes? You have seen so that you can know that Hashem is God. There is none besides God. It is difficult to imagine a more dramatic series of questions or a more definitive answer than this. It is almost impossible to believe that this was spoken thousands of years ago and has been firmly embedded in the Bible for that entire time. It speaks out to us from the ages and asks us these same questions thousands of years later. Have we ever seen such events as these? Has anything quite like this ever even been purported to take place in human history? We have had plenty of time to match this claim, but nothing has even come close. An entire nation hearing the voice of God, speaking from some fiery vision and living to tell about it. An entire nation being brought out of slavery, complete with inexplicable events and history-defying moments. Why did this happen? How and when it did? Why was all this necessary? Couldn't the Israelites have simply been one other nation out of dozens or hundreds or thousands that have inhabited the earth either then or since? The answer apparently is contained in that final verse. You have seen so that you can know that Hashem is God. There is none besides God. All that for this? Wouldn't it have been possible to understand the absolute reality of God without all those bells and whistles? Couldn't we simply realize that truth by looking at the wonders of nature or contemplating the depths of the human soul? Perhaps we could, but this also works. To know God through nature or through the powers of the mind or soul is a wonderful way to spend one's life. It is hard to imagine what could be more meaningful. But that doesn't mean that this is the only way to understand something about God. The realities of history and the puzzling, destined path that humanity has taken is another. The Israelites and their successors, the Jews, have played an undeniably disproportionate role in that history. And the Exodus was both the beginning and the crescendo of their history. The events that took place over that period, lasting maybe a year or so, forged and defined the Jewish role in history so that no matter where they ended up, they would always find themselves seeking God in some way. It is interesting that the punchline of that final verse is the understanding that there is none besides God. It is not that the Israelites will end up rulers of the world, or that the land of Israel will be a magical place filled with the splendors of the Garden of Eden. Those may or may not fit into other prophecies, but not this one. This is a very simple and straightforward goal, to know that there is none besides God. It would not be incorrect to state that this verse suggests a primary goal of the Bible, the mission of the Israelites, and the true role of the Jew. It is just this, to know that there is none besides God. While this may sound very lofty and mysterious on the one hand, and very antiquated and preachy on the other, it is really neither. There is nothing lofty or mysterious about all this. It is about as simple a statement as could be made about reality and what makes it be. It is God. God may be an impenetrable mystery and all that, but God is also as real and as present as anything else. God is simply that source of that reality, whatever form it takes. There is no other source, no matter how hard we may try to substitute something else for God. It may not be an explanation that does much to advance the quest of science, but it sure answers those sticky questions that always linger. God is an ultimate answer may indeed seem a bit overly religious and out of date, but nobody has come up with anything better in that long journey since those words were first spoken. We have filled in a lot of the details, but we haven't come close to anything that puts the whole picture together. This is really what this is all about. Science is a wonderful tool to explore the natural world. Human endeavors of all sorts have frequently been amazing avenues to express the infinite paths available to us in life. But when the dust clears, it all has to come back to some source of it all, and that source is God. A few verses later, we find what seems to be a reiteration of this. Quote, "And you should know today and ponder in your heart that Hashem is God in the heavens above and on the earth below. There is no other." Well, this certainly seems to be saying the same thing as the earlier verse. It is possible that this slightly shorter ending says something not included in that first verse. What really is the difference between, quote, "there is none besides God," and, quote, "there is no other"? The translation of the Hebrew of that second phrase allows for another reading. There is nothing else. What does that mean? Perhaps it suggests that not only is God the source of it all, but that God in some way is all. This is a rather deep thought that penetrates to the very depths of Jewish mysticism, and perhaps should be left for personal contemplation. Whatever those two verses may mean, we can at least glean a bit of clarity about our own situation. Whatever happens, whether through the impassionate forces of nature or through the passionate whims of the human mind, has its ultimate source in God. While this may not make complete sense to us, it does allow us to make a bit more sense of what is happening around us. No matter how bad or how good or how out of control things seem to be going, it may be reassuring that behind it all and within it all lurks God. That may not appear to be the most reasonable explanation of things, but it sure beats believing that there is nothing behind it all, at all. Shabbat Shalom.